I've spent the better part of the last few years trying to figure out how good stories tick in the hopes of crafting some good stories of my own. This endeavor has been, not quite as soul-crushing as being crushed by a car compactor. It turns out that writing a compelling yarn is extremely difficult. Putting to one side the overcoming of one's crippling self-doubt, I'm putting it to one side because I haven't quite yet figured out how to kick self-doubt in the testes and run past him while he rides around on the floor. To write a good story requires a lot of work, which I think goes easily unseen. Having enough discipline to make yourself sit down every day and put words to paper is certainly important, but that effort doesn't necessarily ensure that the words themselves are going to be any good. Outlines, notes, proofreading, edits, and revisions, these are all necessary parts of the process. If I had to pick one, the most important realization I had during this so very fun-filled adventure was that ideas are cheap and execution is everything. A more depressing spin on this notion would be that simply having something to say isn't enough. Everybody has something to say, it's never been a problem for humans, opinions, assholes, etc. But what exactly does execution is everything mean when we're talking about the craft of storytelling? I suppose execution refers to the thing you do which makes the story real, makes it material, like writing it down, filming a scene, or coding a level. The story no longer exists exclusively within the confines of your own head. It becomes something a little more magical. It becomes tangible through whichever medium the story is conveyed, and it exists forever within the collective conscience of a story's purveyors. Getting there is the craft. I came to discover through my journey to become a not shit writer, as you can tell, not quite there yet, that the act of crafting a story is like building a skyscraper. And just like building skyscrapers, something I'm not even remotely familiar with, I have to imagine that well-laid plans are critical. In the case of writing a story, a well-laid plan comes in the form of an outline, or at least some kind of guide. A guide as to how the plot should be arranged to best facilitate the most potent payoffs. A guide as to how the main characters think, what they want, what they fear. A guide to keep track of the story's core theme, enabling one to interweave it with the plot, characters, and world in a way which, assuming there is such a thing as good and bad stories, will almost always resonate with viewers, readers, players, and listeners. But that takes hard work, and who the fuck's got time for hard work when there's money to be made and pussy to be slain? This is America, baby! After several years of consuming stories, analyzing media, and practicing the craft for myself, I think I've happened across the keys to the storytelling castle. And the best part is you don't even need to exert the effort of lifting your arm, placing the key in the lock, and turning the fucking thing. All you need to do is jangle them. For all the uninitiated, key jangling is when you take a set of keys and jangle them in the air. Well, that was completely redundant. When it comes to stories, or media in general, key jangling is often used to describe a very surface-level spectacle. Hollow or nonsensical fan service immediately comes to mind. An important distinction to remember though, as fan service is not necessarily a bad thing. Fan service and good are not mutually exclusive terms. For instance, the reprise of an iconic theme in a contextually appropriate instance, such as basically every usage of the Avengers theme, can be quite effective in evoking excitement in a viewer. This exact thing, like all good things, can go too far though. Relying on the nostalgia evoked by old material to an excessive extent can completely sap the work of its original meaning. But remember, we're trying to completely cut down on that whole effort thing, so really, who gives a shit about respecting a work's legacy? I say it's high time we jangle some fucking keys! Let's say you're writing for, I don't know, Star Wars, since we're already on the subject. Maybe you're writing a show about a stoic bounty hunter traveling the galaxy in search of the Jedi. You might think it would be interesting to write a completely self-contained story which has nothing to do with the main Star Wars saga, but that probably won't make as much money, and again, we're trying to minimize on the effort we're putting into this project. After all, those kilojoules could be put to better use, like smoking Cuban cigars while lounging on a humongous pile of cash. Star Wars is rife with iconic imagery and characters, and if you own the entire IP, you can pillage that shit to your heart's content. Creating new characters is difficult. Wheeling out old characters people like whom you didn't make is much easier. So let's default to that for this bounty hunter show. Be sure to awkwardly drop in characters from more beloved stories in the Star Wars saga without any regard for whether their placement in the story makes sense and is insanely convenient. Feel free to ignore the fact that in a galaxy filled with likely trillions of living beings, it'd be astronomically unlikely for our main character to encounter several of the most important players in said galaxy within the span of a few weeks. Players like Ahsoka Tano, Boba Fett, and Luke fucking Skywalker. It'd be even more insane if these characters entered the story via hearsay or by locating the main character in the middle of a planet-spanning desert and then just not showing up for several episodes. We'd really be pushing it if one of these characters docked with an Imperial cruiser and cut through a bunch of edgy robots only a few seconds before our main characters would have been killed. Imagine if he decided to take a piss before jumping into his X-Wing. But again, we're not doing that effort thing here. We're here for white lightsabers, knee rockets, seismic charges, and deepfakes. Doesn't matter whether the story makes any sense at all. It certainly doesn't matter if our original characters have even a tiny semblance of personality or motivation. All that matters is that things be cool. It's the rule of cool. And there isn't anything cooler than Luke Skywalker cutting down some fucking dark troopers, regardless of whether it even makes sense for him to be there, and especially regardless of whether he's acting in character or not. I mean, it's not like Luke Skywalker would have any questions at all. Just don't think about it. That, my friends, is how you jangle keys. And remember that if you jangle the right set of keys in just the right way, instead of being derided for your astounding laziness, you will instead be applauded. Effort be damned, logic be tactical nuked. Something I've grown to really appreciate over the last few years is that good stories are about both the destination and the journey. They're about the payoffs and the setups. The former means extraordinarily little without the latter, because there is no destination without a journey, and it's during the journey where the work is done. It's after the journey when reaching the destination becomes meaningful. But key jangling isn't about the journey. It's not even about reaching the destination. It's about pretending to have made the trip when you haven't even set foot in the fucking car.